Hi there, I'm your host June Mack and you're listening to the Fully Woo podcast. I'll be talking about all the fun woo-woo things in a down-to-earth, bright, light-hearted and easy to navigate way. Hopefully, I'll be able to help you ignite and light the way on your own spiritual journey and evolution too. Welcome to episode 9 of the Fully Woo podcast. Today's episode is about reincarnation or past lives, or the fact that your soul has probably been on earth multiple times, hundreds of times over in different situations, in different time frames, as different people. A little bit mind-blowing for some, but getting into your past lives or knowing about them can get you past certain fears or limiting beliefs or understanding as to why you maybe chose this particular life path, or sometimes knowing when it's time to break particular life patterns. I hope that you enjoy my understanding on this subject, and I can't wait to share some of my experiences in episode 9. This episode is brought to you by the Light Seeker Circle. The Light Seeker Circle is your spiritual learning library and psychic development space, a membership which brings you community, new content and live readings every single month, plus a woo-woo development archive of spiritual content which is already in there and ready to watch instantly. Masterclasses, meditations, activations and programs on intuition, mediumship, card reading, empath and energy maintenance, plus so much more. Lower price point, no lock-ins. Check out the Light Seekers Circle via junemac.com/programs. Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Fully Woo podcast. I'm your host June Mack, psychic and energy healer, psychic development teacher and intuition igniter. I'm super pumped to talk to you today about today's subject, which is going to be reincarnation, or past lives, or the experience of experiencing past lives. If you are unfamiliar with the term, the belief is that most of us, we have not only lived this one life as us or you, or as me on this earth. The belief is that we have lived as other people. Most likely you've been here on earth before as, say you're a female, you might have been here as a male. You've probably been different races. And if you are super open-minded, there is also the belief that we have lived on different planets or star constellations or in frequencies that are more than our 3D world consists of. You may have heard of the term starseed, and that is where that term comes from, the belief that we have not only been just human. But I'll touch on that a little bit later. It might be a little bit much for some. I totally could have lost you there. I will admit, when I first did hear about starseeds, it pretty much almost lost me. I was like, what? But I'll come back to that a little bit more. So just hear me out if you're new to that and are thinking, oh my gosh, June, you've definitely lost it. I would not consider myself an expert on this topic, on past lives, but to be honest, I wouldn't consider myself an expert as anything. I'm one of those people, I think I actually said it this week, jack of all trades, master of none, where it's kind of like I know a little bit about a lot of different things, but I'm not like what you would say, going deep into these any subject really. I can only share with you of my own experiences and what I believe to be true. So I know I've said it so many times before, just take what resonates with you and stamp out the rest if you like. But, for me, the first time I did hear about past lives or the possibility of past lives was from my dad. And I'm quite sure I was pretty young, and I remember he was reading a book and I picked up the book, and I don't have a huge recollection about it, just that he explained to me what it meant, and he explained it just very matter-of-factly, like this is just what happened. Like, you haven't just been you, we've been here before, most likely many times before. in different time frames, in different settings as different people. I also had the experience quite early on because my auntie, who I think I've mentioned in this podcast before, series, who is more psychic on my mum's side, who's now passed, but she also mentioned it to me as a child, just randomly, also quite matter-of-factly saying, well, because my mum's side of the family, as I've said before, is from the Philippines, and they grew up quite poor. But my auntie always had this very extravagant taste, and always, felt quite like she expected the best of things. And she'd said to me, the reason why I love beautiful things and I feel like I deserve the best of everything, even though we don't have that much money, is because in a past life I was a princess. So she basically just came straight out with it. And I was super, super rich. Like, I've seen this past life before, and this is why I still feel like I deserve these things. And I have, this expensive taste, even though I don't have the money for it. And she'd also said, I always have these throat troubles in this life, sore throat, like throat issues, basically because in this past life I was hung before. And I'm pretty sure I was a kid. I wouldn't say any older than like 11 years old. And she just randomly comes out with this stuff. I also vividly remember as a child watching documentaries on past lives and watching them about children who had described, like being able to describe a life that they had lived very, very clearly, to the point of even mentioning names of who they were in this past life. And these kids I'm talking were like 3 years old, 4 years old. There's no way. I remember in one of the documentaries that I watched, a child talking about how they were on the Titanic, on this big boat called the Titanic, and this was their name. And their parents, did not come from this understanding of anything around past lives, but this kid would not stop talking about it. So they actually did research into it, and they were thinking, how can this 3-year-old know all these details about the Titanic that we have never taught him? We've never spoken about it. There is no way. And they actually found his name, or the name he kept mentioning, in the files of people who had passed away during the Titanic. So that's just one of the stories from this particular documentary that's literally probably like 25 years old, because I remember watching it as a kid. And I remember that so vividly. And since then, I've heard so many stories from parents who their children, because they have just literally come from the source, like they newly come down, from heaven, or they've just been there, and they so very vividly remember past lives in detail. And, these memories sometimes or usually fade by, I think it's around 7 or 8, and the memories are a lot less clear, but there's so many stories that I've heard. There's also, if you're interested and you haven't actually watched, a recent documentary, Surviving Death on Netflix, there's an episode. So the whole series is pretty cool, but there is an episode in Reincarnation there if you are interested, to go down that rabbit hole and you haven't really gone down it before. My own daughter, so my oldest one, has even said, when she was quite young, so she was very drawn to keyboard lessons or playing the piano. And she just randomly said one day, I think I'm really good at the keyboard or playing the piano because I did used to play this in a past life. I've played it before. And this is like, at this point, I was not even down the woo-woo rabbit hole to the depths that I am now. And I'd never spoken about it before. I actually don't know if she used the term past life or if I just put that in there. She may have said just something along the lines of, I've done this before when I was somebody else, or something totally freaky. And that's always stuck with me. And she has been naturally good at the keyboard and always drawn to it. So that's something that my own daughter has said before too. I wouldn't say that me in particular, I've had any memories that I remember myself from past lives, like as a child. So I don't remember saying anything like that myself. But once I started looking into past lives as an adult, there were things from my childhood that started to make sense. So for example, as a child, I was obsessed with anything Egyptian, hieroglyphics, shows, books, those, I don't know, for those of you that are as old as me, I'm 37, Science Quest books. I don't know if you guys remember them from when you were a kid, but I absolutely pored over these. There was a whole Egyptian section on it, and I studied and studied the same Egyptian pages over and over again. I was also obsessed with, Michael Jackson, who I, love anyway, but Remember the Time video clip. I think this is probably the second time in the podcast I've spoken about the Remember the Time video clip, but just that was the first time I'd kind of seen anything on TV with like the whole Egyptian themed, and I remember being obsessed with this video clip as well. I also remember being obsessed with mermaids, like so obsessed. I used to swim under the water. And, Ocean Girl, the Ocean Girl, if you ever watched that, how she swims and like kind of bobs up and down in the water. I used to do that all the time. And I remember being so obsessed with mermaids that I actually, I would ask my auntie, my woo-woo one, do you think that if I wanted to, I could turn into a mermaid? Like, do you think if I tried hard enough, I could actually turn into one somehow? I remember the Little Mermaid book and opening it and putting it into the sink full of water and trying to go inside the book as a kid so I could experience being a mermaid. Literally obsessed. My auntie, she said, if you eat enough fish, maybe that's true, like obviously just trying to be nice. And I think back to it now and it's just so ridiculous. But I just remember being under the water and, so many memories of just feeling the most calm, the most at peace while being under the water. And I have still, as an adult, I'm always drawn towards water and need to be next to it to feel calm. The house that I'm in now, I think I've mentioned in the podcast as well, it overlooks a lake, and I just have the beach, anything to do with water, I've always had to be close to it. So I'll come back to that, the reasons behind that. But as I started to get deeper down, the spiritual track and started meditating, some of my first clairvoyant flickering images I saw during meditation were pyramids or Egyptian-like temples and statues and hieroglyphics again. And I even started later, when I was able to hold images for a little bit longer, draw the images that I'd seen or the symbols that I'd seen, and then go and try and look them up, and then found out that they were actual things, like they actually they were actual symbols that meant things. And I thought, oh gosh, maybe this is just something that's ingrained in my memory from, being a kid and studying hieroglyphics, but surely not. Like literally, I think I was in grade 1. So that's like 6 years old? Surely not. But, especially when you first start going down the spiritual hole or realm, going into it, you doubt yourself a lot. Look, I still do, to be honest. But once my abilities leveled up a little bit more, so I started to see things playing out in movies rather than just flickering images. I started to see, even this woman a few times, and I still vividly remember the first time I saw this woman, and she looks like some type of queen or Egyptian queen, and she was on top of this pillar, and all of a sudden this woman during my meditation just whipped out these huge massive wings from this pillar, on the top of this pillar, and it was like everyone was looking up at her or worshipping her type thing. And then another time, literally as soon as I started meditating, this woman, or this same woman, just dropped down in front of me, like with her huge wings out, like something from, X-Men, that guy, that X-Men with like the huge wings, and, like actually just dropping down in front of me, like in a power stance mode. So for anyone that is a fan of the Black Widow, I think they make fun of it or her power stance in her latest movie. And literally this woman with the big wings, like jumped down or, fell down from the sky, basically in front of me during one of my meditations. And I didn't look her up or anything or know she was an actual thing. I just wondered if I was tripping, as you do sometimes. And when I started when I started to go to more readings and mix with more spiritual or, people with abilities or psychic abilities, I got a few past life readings, and more than one reader kept going on or explaining my connection with Egypt. So it started to make sense, and I do believe I've had many lives there or in Egypt, or look, I still haven't quite gotten to the bottom of it, but I know that there's a really big connection there. Another reader actually even explained or said straight away this very close connection I have with Goddess Isis. Something along the line of I was one of her assistants or like disciples, and I'm still doing the work for Goddess Isis. So it's like I'm assisting her around this time on Earth as this new Earth, which for those of you that haven't heard of the whole new Earth thing, it's about how, very vaguely without going into a whole nother thing, about how the Earth's vibration is rising or the need for it to rise. And when I was told about Goddess Isis, I don't even still really understand what she stands for, but when I was like, well, who's Goddess Isis? And she started explaining to me about this Egyptian god or goddess with the big wings, I was literally dumbfounded. Like, this is the goddess or the woman that I have been seeing in my meditations. I remember having shivers everywhere, and I'm still, as I'm talking about it now, like, can't believe it. And it's, this Goddess Isis was the power pose woman, the woman that I was seeing, and I've seen more than once. And I've always had this affinity with wings too. So this is another thing. I actually have a tattoo of wings on my back. I remember anything wing related, like beautiful angel wings, I've just always been so obsessed or drawn to it. I even remember, do you guys know Rihanna's tattoo? Like as in the singer Rihanna? I remember seeing the goddess, like the tattoo of Goddess Isis. She's got it under her boob. So if you want to Google image that, it's beautiful. And this was before I even knew she was a thing too. And all of a sudden it all clicked together. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Rihanna's tattoo. I literally had photos of that on my phone because I modeled the wings that I have on my back kind of from that initial tattoo that she has. Mine didn't turn out as good, I have to say, but I was only 18 when I got my first tattoo done. So I feel like it needs to be redone. The wings are a lot smaller. I didn't have the guts to get the big wings, but all these things, all of a sudden, it's like they all flashed in my mind and everything made sense. I know now that I have Egyptian guides. So this is like flicking ahead. So one of the first guides that I've come into contact with of my own are a male and female Egyptian guides. So it all started to piece together. And since my first experiences, with seeing little flickers of Egypt or whatever in my meditations, I have seen many, many of my past lives. So as I've gotten better with my abilities, and the first time I remember seeing a life, like a snippet of a life playing before me, was during an exercise called mirror gazing. So this is something that I teach my psychic mentoring clients about, and it is an exercise which I won't go into the details because it takes a while, but it helps with your clairvoyance a lot. So I did see the first life that I saw, quite a brutal life where my husband in that particular life had actually murdered me. I know it sounds extremely extreme, but the thing is, with past lives, if you go to a reader or if you start seeing them, usually it's more the brutal lives that you might see, because these are the lives that are ingrained in our auric field that were so, traumatic that these things happened, that they are still affecting us in today, because all these different lives have come together and they're still, even though we can't remember them with our human brain most of the time, they're still a part of our soul. They're still a part in our energy somewhere. Like, I don't know how it works, the nitty-gritty down and deep, but there are fears that we might have now, or there are cycles that we are in now that are directly related to things that we've been going through before. And in this, when we see past lives, we're not necessarily going to see all the lives where, we've literally nothing happened. Like, you've been a farmer, you lived a happy life on a farm, you farmed every day, not much happened. Our spirit guides aren't going to decide to show us these lives, because what do we have to learn from that? They show us the things that will make sense to fears we have now, to beliefs we have now, things that are going to help us. So often when, if you are ready to see them, this is kind of what you do see. So that life that I was shown where my husband had murdered me, that made sense to me in a way that my husband now is super, super devoted to me, right? And without embarrassing him, which is probably too late, or going too deep into it, he is he would support me to the end of time. Like, literally, I feel like no matter what I do, he's so supportive, just beyond. Like, he's my number one supporter. And I feel like why I was seeing that life where something terrible had happened to me, and I won't go into the details because I do not want to traumatize anyone, but of what I'd seen, it made sense to me now that maybe the reason why I have this amazing supportive husband was because of what I had been through in a past life. And it was like this was almost owed to me this time around because of my husband's decisions in a previous life. I also have seen lives where my children have been, passed away, or killed or taken away from me. I remember one in particular, a very clear one, which was actually quite recent, where I was meditating and I saw this life where I was like wearing this, it was like a white sheet type outfit. I honestly couldn't place what time frame it was from. I used to get really caught up on like, when is this, like 1600s, 1800s, and then use my pendulum to figure it out. Now I'm not so pedantic about that. I'm just like, what is the lesson that I have to learn from this? But anyway, I saw this life and I was out, I inside this white sling outfit that I was wearing that also went over my head. I know that I had a baby wrapped up in there. I'd just given birth and there was a newborn baby wrapped up on my back, but I couldn't afford to not work. So in this life, I'm quite sure I was very poor. I remember looking at my hands and seeing just like working hands, calluses everywhere, like them bleeding. And I had to go out and work in this field and it was hot, boiling hot. And I remember, and this might get a lot for some people. So if you're easily upset by things, especially in regards to babies, maybe stop listening here. But I was harvesting, I was like wheat or something, and cutting down all this wheat and working out in this boiling hot sun. And I couldn't afford, even though I just had this baby, I knew it was very fresh because I actually still feel in my body, like when I think back to this lifetime that I was seeing, the aches and pains of when you've just recently given birth. And I'm slaving away in the hot sun, cutting down this straw or wheat, whatever it is. And then I go to take a little break and go to unwrap my baby. So this is where it's going to get brutal. So for anyone that's listening that could be easily upset, please stop or skip ahead. And unwrapping the baby and seeing that the baby had passed away. I think some type of SIDS thing, because it was all wrapped up in this sling. Obviously back in whatever time this was, there wasn't a knowledge around SIDS. It was hot, which we know now from our knowledge of SIDS that, being hot can make a difference. And I remember being so, it's like awful, like traumatized. And the reason why I feel like I was seeing this life in particular and other lives where I'd lost children is I have this crazy fear around, something happening to my children in this particular lifetime. And it actually makes me emotional talking about it because, that's the most horrible thing that could happen to anybody. And there are people that have said, oh my gosh, you're so overprotective, like stop being a helicopter parent. I, as a mum, actually, after I had my first daughter especially, actually had postnatal anxiety, like really, really bad. And a huge part of this was this crazy fear that something was going to happen to my daughter. And all these flashbacks after I saw this life where I had lost this baby, from what I would now know, probably some type of SIDS of being in the sling and not being able to breathe properly, being in the heat, and all these flashbacks of me as a brand new mum checking on my child. I'm not even kidding, my first child. I did not sleep because I was so pedantic about checking that she was breathing. I could not relax. Every noise, every movement, I was constantly licking my finger and putting it under her nose and checking she was breathing. And I was like, oh my goodness, this totally makes sense. All this anxiety, all this lack of sleep that I put myself through because I could not relax, was probably now related to, this lifetime or other lifetimes that I've seen where I've lost children. And it made so much sense to me because I remember thinking, I am not like usually a wound up person. But when it comes to especially my first daughter, oh my goodness, like anytime she coughed, sniffled, made a sound, I remember sitting up in the middle of the night going, like worst case scenario, she's got whooping cough. Worst case scenario, like it's meningitis, she's got a fever. Completely irrational. Like I think I drove my husband literally like up the wall, especially with my first. And all of these memories came flooding back and it just made so much sense. And in knowing this or seeing this particular life, it helped me to let go of some of this fear and actually think, you know what? She's safe this time around. She's okay. I'm not going to go out into the field and, work in the sun, with her on my back. She's safe. She's okay. I have this fear not because something is going to happen to her. I hope, I pray. It's because something has happened before and it's literally somewhere stuck in my energetic field and it's hard for me to let go of because that is a hugely traumatic thing. So that's another life that I've seen, and you can learn so much about yourself from tapping into these past lives. There was one where I remember a life where I was like some kind of Sherpa or like on this big mountain. I think I was like working on a donkey, and part of my life was in this life was helping people get to the top of this mountain, like in high altitudes. And I remember working so hard for the money, like going up and down these mountains, literally risking my life every day. I think I was a male in this life. And then literally earning, like I remember seeing it in my hand, it was like 1 penny or something. That wasn't much. And then the message that came with this life or seeing this life was it was hard for me to accept money. When I first started my business, I wasn't charging the worth, and it was really hard to feel like when I earned money that it was worth it. And I think it was connected in, or why they were showing me this life was it was connected into this life where literally I nearly killed myself every day for one little coin, silver coin, that I don't even know how often I got that coin for. I remember we were very poor and drinking some type of broth, it's some kind of soupy broth which didn't have much in it, for dinner every night. So it was like that belief that you had to work extremely hard to get any type of money was probably linked to that life. I remember seeing lives as like this overweight Buddhist monk, which showed me that I'd lived these lives also, in service of spirit. And there were these lives that I'd seen, and people, might say, well, how do you know this is true? How do you know that this is actually real? I remember looking and with my husband telling him about lives that I had seen and remembering details of particular clothing or things, even torture machines in some lifetimes I'd seen and never seen them before, and looking them up, like Googling it and actually finding, that color Buddhist uniform that I'd never seen on TV before actually exists. And it's from this, that type of color Buddhist robe is from this particular area. And we never knew these things. Like I saw a hat one time when I was a gypsy, and I knew I was a gypsy, and I had this like type of, boy's hat on. And I remember looking up male gypsy hats and then finding it. And then I remember in another life where I knew I was in Asia somewhere, and this was actually a reading that I did for one of my closest friends. And I said, I see this torture machine. And I remember actually after she left, looking up, torture machines from like ancient, Asia, and finding the torture machine that I just described to my friend, and then sending it to her and going, oh my gosh, so there are countless other experiences like this. So for me, that's the proof that I need. That is proof for me. And each time I, was told about a particular life or seen it myself, it was for a reason. And it was something that I had issues with in this life, something that or fears that I had helped, that had helped me to better understand why I am who I am. And, why I have some of these certain beliefs. Not everything is past life related, but some things are. And once I understood and knew not to make certain mistakes again, especially one particular life that I was told about where I lived this life in fear of kind of what others would think of me, and I lived and wasted my life with a mother who suppressed me and of being who I was, and I literally ended up like this old hag that never got married, and all I did was look after my mother. I never did anything in my life, and I had all this potential and I wasted it. So that particular life was quite powerful for me because it made me think, I'm never going to do that again. I'm not going to waste my potential. I'm not going to waste my life, and I'm not going to live in the fear of what other people think of me. I'm going to live my life for me. As long as I know that I'm a good person and I'm coming from a good place, that's all that matters, is the judgment that comes from yourself. I also have, and this comes up also in other people that I read for many times, I had lives where I was spiritual or very spiritual, and then I was persecuted for being a witch. And I know I've had lifetimes where terrible things have happened to me because of my spiritual beliefs. And this comes up in other people's readings that I read for all the time. I've seen so many situations where there are these powerful spiritual light workers who have all of these gifts and abilities, and they're too afraid to step out of the spiritual closet. And then when they come and have a reading with me, some of this is connected to past life issues where I see situations where they were basically punished severely for being woo-woo or for, helping others, with herbs, and they were called a witch or whatever. Literal witch wounds, we call them witches' wounds. And once I, have been made aware of these fears, and even I know that I've had lives where I've been persecuted for being spiritual, it has helped me to be able to push through that fear in this life and let it go. So past life work can be very powerful. It's helped me understand a lot. It's not something that I would say that I specialize in. I wouldn't say I don't do past life work. There are people who I know, if there's something past life related that you need help getting through, there are people I can refer you to. But for me, they come up in readings. I don't usually go in with the intention of picking up a past life, but they will come up, or your spirit guides will bring them up if it's important to you to get past a certain situation in your life. Like my guides will just bring it up, and that person needs to know, you've had issues or repeated cycles with this particular person before in a similar situation, and it's your goal this time around to be able to break this repeated cycle, basically. So sometimes I see a few different past lives in a particular reading. Sometimes for people, when I read for them, I don't get any. It just depends on, one, whether they're ready to see past life things, because your spirit guides will only bring up what you're ready for. And there are some people new to the spiritual space that if I told them about a past life, they would probably just be like, you are crazy. I'm never coming back to see you again. So your guides really only tend to bring up what you're ready for, which is amazing. And I always trust them for doing that. But yeah, they're the reason why the things that we see are often quite dramatic, because these are the lives that we have to learn from. But here's where, if it hasn't already gotten too much for you, here's where it might become a bit much. So as I became more open during my meditations, and there was some understanding that that possibly Earth is not the only place, right? This is not the only place where we could have possibly lived. I started to see places in my meditations that did not look like Earth. So even during readings, I saw landscapes that I'm like, this is not Earth, or clothing or technology that looked way beyond what we have here. And I got super confused because this was before I sort of understood a little bit more about what I was seeing. I'm like, what am I seeing the future here? I saw a life where I was in this type of war, and I was fighting against other people, and I had this weird kind of armor on. I know I was a male, and I know I was in this place that looks like some huge desert that didn't look like Earth. And I was fighting with like these laser beam things, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've definitely lost it now. So many times where I feel like I've lost it. Maybe I have. And I thought, maybe I'm making up these messages or whatever. But this is after I started seeing these things. And, it's funny how your spirit team help you out, because all this stuff started popping up in my Instagram feed, or I was introduced to people who would, or mentors or teachers that talk about or started talking about star seeds. And a star seed I guess comes from the fact that, or the idea that there is not just Earth. There are countless other planets, universes, realms that are far beyond anything most of us or our human minds can comprehend. Again, not my area of expertise, but this is just from what I have experienced. And I did have, so a star seed is someone who their soul has not originated here on Earth. And chances are, if you are listening to this podcast episode and you are open to it, your soul also has not originated on Earth, because Earth seeds I tend to be newer souls who aren't so open or so, I guess, awoken to all of this type of thing. So I was told from a wonderful past life reader who I haven't asked her permission, so I won't mention it, but if you want her details, feel free to inbox me, that the planet that I originated from was a place called Mintaka, my soul was first ever incarnated in this place called Mintaka, this place no longer exists, and this planet has been destroyed, basically. And you can do, some research on this. You'll go down a massive rabbit hole if you start researching Mintaka. And basically the idea is that wherever your soul originated from, or where it first started incarnating, you embody a lot of these traits of this planet, and it's sort of like at the core of who you are. Obviously, we pick up different things from different planets we've been on. It's almost like, if you're from Australia, but then you go and live, in England, you're still an Australian at heart, but you pick up a lot of, English, slang or traits or things as well. It's like you pick up all these little things. But basically, Mintaka is meant to be a water planet, which cue here the connection in with my past, with my affinity as a child with water and mermaids, mermaid-like creatures, which apparently communicate to each other like dolphins or whales through, how do they communicate? Through weird frequencies. And, they are my favorite. Dolphins and whales have always been one of my favorite animals too. And if I could be a particular animal, that's what I would choose as well. So even though the first time I heard about this, it completely blew my mind, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I started to be able to connect the dots. And then for me now, I 100% believe this is true. This is what I believe to be true. Might be a bit much for you. Totally fine. It's, each to their own. And in this water planet or Mintaka, there is no hate. It's a planet with no jealousy. They all sort of live in peace, and there's people here that come from, the creatures here basically have no ill intent. And it can be hard for people who have originated from Mintaka on Earth sometimes, because it's like they cannot understand why people on Earth, or there are some people here that can be so cruel, or why it's so harsh. It can be quite hard for them. So a lot of things that I heard about, without going into great detail of that, made a lot of sense to who I am. And since I started opening up a little bit more and learning a little bit more about, star seeds, I started to experience more, because, my spirit team, I guess, were like, okay, well, you're ready to see all the weird stuff. And I can say that in my readings, I started to sometimes get, star seed lineage. I've heard, I'm mainly only familiar with Pleiadians, because I know my husband, his star seed is are Pleiadian, and I understand the traits that they embody. And it's like when I do a reading, I can generally pick if you are Mantakan or Pleiadian straight away. And I also feel like clients that are drawn towards me are one of these two starseeds quite often. Sometimes I've seen things in my meditations from Lemuria, Atlantis. And again, I don't know much about, I haven't done much research into this. I only know from what I have seen and what I have been told, from spirit. And I have also, during my meditations or during healings, I believe connected with what you might call, yes, aliens or galactic beings, which, during healings, some might step in, or a particular race which are very good healers. So there's the Arcturians, for example, which is like they are this a lot of blue light energy, and they started popping up in my meditations and said, you can use us for healings. And then there are some people that I tap into when I do readings that I know the Arcturians come down for them. And then usually these people turn out to be healers, which again, it blows my mind. And they're like, you can use us for healing because they are powerful healers. So I think, I know it can be a lot for some people, but I think, it's hard to wrap your head around as a human, but really our planet in itself is so much of a miracle, and it's so trippy if you really think about it. How can we think that, or be so ignorant to think that we are the only ones, that are around? And I have connected with some energies, energies of love and light as well, that have tried to explain where they're from. Galactic beings, I guess you could call them, who say things like, I don't have a human body, but I exist, like in between realms, or they're trying to explain where they come from, and they're showing like in between these light walls, and I've done my best to try and make sense of it and just take messages that come through, but that's probably a whole nother episode. And I've heard about galactic wars since, that there was some type of galactic war at some point, and that's probably what I was seeing in that lifetime, where I'm like fighting people and I've got these laser beam things shooting people. And I know some amazing intuitives that this is really their thing. They thrive on this whole galactic sci-fi type thing. I only know very, very minimal, or from what I've seen. It's not really something that I know a lot or deep into. I haven't gone into it. Only my understanding from what I have experienced. I've also started to understand that time is not linear. So this is a really hard thing to wrap your head around as a human, that we can, after we've experienced a life, say in 2022, we can go back up and go, hey, we want to experience a life, but I'm going to choose it back from the 1800s, and I'm going to do that life now. And it doesn't have to be in order. Also, how there's this speak about your higher self, which is like the best version of you somewhere deep down in the future that we can connect with. It's like the lives that we are living now are directly affecting our higher self lives, or lives down in the future. And we are constantly changing, what those futures and who we are looks like. I can't even go down that. It's just too much. So anyway, why does this happen? Why do we do lives over and over again in so many different forms and in different lifetimes and in different ways, male, female, poor, rich? My understanding is basic, as I'm going to say again, but I think that our soul wants to experience and pick as many different lessons as they can. They might pick to be rich in one lifetime and then pick to be poor in another. And you might pick to be an amazing husband in this life and a real, you might have a real tough life in another one. Literally, I know that we pick our parents, based on, like, before we come down into this lifetime, we pick our parents based on who is going to teach our soul the life lessons that we want to learn this time around. And you might pick parents that are abusive, and you think, why would I pick this as a soul? Why would I pick parents that are abusive? Why? And the reason is, maybe your life lesson, or one of the purposes that you're here to experience in this particular lifetime, is to come from abusive parents, but then come out of that and help. Maybe you end up being a guidance counselor that literally helps other people dealing with this trauma and to sort of break this cycle and make the best of it. Or maybe you have literally been in a past life an abusive parent, and your part of your karmic cycle this time around is to break that cycle and be the best parent that you possibly can be. There's so many things that I could go down to, but some things that we experience here in this particular lifetime, they are set in stone. So maybe that thing, about having abusive parents, maybe this is something that 100% that was meant to be. And part of your lesson is, can we break this cycle this time around? Can we break out of it? Can we not continue and go ahead and make the mistakes that our parents made and be abusive? Can we make sure that we change ourselves for the best because of this experience? Are we strong enough to break free from this? Maybe we've experienced this over and over again. It's one of our lessons to break that pattern or this cycle. And literally, I feel like we sometimes repeat certain lessons that we need to learn over and over again until we get it right. You might be in a toxic relationship. I have actually had, readings where I have had clients that have come from domestic abuse, and they might be from a culture where domestic abuse is accepted. And this time they've come from, and literally their guides are telling me they've come from lifetimes before where they have been in a similar situation where they've come from this domestic abuse. And this time they have chosen this particular time frame because this is a time frame where it's time to stand up and say no. Like, this is not okay. Even though it's part of their culture where it's somewhat accepted, this time it's time to, time on earth, it's time to change this. And this person or this lifetime they've chosen is, are they strong enough to stand up for this and actually go to court and show other people from their culture that it's not okay to be, in a domestic abuse relationship. It's not okay to be beaten, and this should not be accepted. And these particular clients that have come to me, their guides are so proud. Like, what you did was meant to be. You were meant to stand up to, this situation, and you're meant to be here as a beacon that helps other people from your similar culture to stand up and say that this type of behavior is not all right. Maybe this time around your plan is, or your soul has picked this life because your aim is to be a good parent. You might have had lives where you haven't been such a good parent. I've seen lives where I was a male and I was basically an a-hole. Like, I treated women like an object. I was greedy. I did not respect them at all. And my taking from seeing this life, but this is the reason why I feel like in this life, I'm here especially to help women. Like, I have a few male clients, but majority of them are ladies or females, and they're drawn to me. And I do think that this lifetime was shown to me as to what an a-hole I was, because this time they said, okay, you've experienced and you didn't master this lifetime of respecting women, so now you are going to help them. Literally, this is what you're here to do, is to help women. I know that one of my life lessons here this time around is to be as authentic as possible. And I am trying. I am learning not to hide things that are part of me. So love it or hate who I am, I know that when I am being authentic to myself, it feels really, really good. I used to hide things like, for example, I'm a pole dancer, as in like I do it for fun. It's not a job for me, which there's nothing against people who do it for a job. Like, amen to them. They make a lot of money, and all the power to them. I do it for fitness, and I used to be really embarrassed. Like, I literally have been a pole dancer since I think 2 years before I had my youngest. So that's 5 years now. And I used to hide it. It was like a dirty little secret. And it's literally like the past couple of years, I'm like, why am I embarrassed of this? Pole dancing is awesome. Pole dancers are strong. They are powerful. They're doing it for themselves. It's very, very empowering. It's an amazing art. Why am I embarrassed? So I'm literally here to tell everybody now. And I used to hide it from, especially parents-in-laws, because I'm like, what are they going to think? They think that I'm doing this, there is just not the understanding around it. But I know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for fitness. I'm doing it because it's fun. I'm doing it because it feels amazing. And that is what is important. I know that one of my life lessons around this time around is to experience bliss and happiness. and to know what really is at the core of happiness, which is love. And I know that I'm here to experience it this time around because I deserve it. It's in my karmic cycle. I've had a lot of very shitty lives, many lives of torture or sadness or extreme loss or grief. And that's why this time around I'm here to experience happiness. One of my clients, and I'm sure he actually won't mind me shouting him out. He's did Bloom, my psychic mentoring program with me, and he described. So it's Matt Mastery. Here's a shout out to you, Matt. He actually does the audio on my podcast. So, yeah, this is why it sounds a lot better. So shout out to him. He actually described to me as life, or this time around on Earth, as like the Matrix. So for those of you, he's like from this huge sci-fi background, but for those of you that have seen the Matrix, it's kind of like how they plug in and literally it's like a big game. And I totally understand that perspective. I do believe I relate to that. So Dolores Cannon, to anyone who has not heard about her, she's now passed away, but she's like one of my spiritual, people who I look up to, or like a mentor. A lot of her teachings, and she talks about how life is like a game. So it's like life's game, or Earth's game. You decide when and how you want to play it, and then you come down and you play it as best as you can. And you might decide to sit out a couple of rounds of the game and just be a soul or a spirit that, hangs out for a bit and then come down again and try it again. Or you might decide to go somewhere easier, because I've said before in previous podcast episodes, Earth is hard. Earth is one of the hardest places that you can decide to reincarnate, in. And each time we play a round of Earth's game, our soul learns more and it evolves more. And we do a life review, and at the end of each life, and we evaluate it, without judgment, see what we did right, see what we did wrong, and we can see where we can better ourselves next time around, like what are we here to learn or to really embody next time. And then that's what we might choose in our next life, like what do we not master properly. Our soul evolves, more, and hopefully becomes closer to enlightenment, or towards, source, or closer to being or rejoining, the one or the universe, or whatever you want to call it. You might, evolve eventually to becoming a guide to other people that are down here on Earth. So usually I think the better we do here this time around, the better usually the life we get to live the next time around. What we don't get to achieve, or what we don't master, we have to learn that lesson again. So my dad also spoke often about life being a game. He has poems where he basically says in his poems, because he was a beautiful writer, that he's sorry he said certain things because he was just playing life's little game. And when he was passing away, actually the day before he died, when he was definitely transitioning, and definitely I feel like channeling some deep stuff, some of his last words to me and my younger sister were, be careful, because he was always so worried about us. Be careful, take it easy. And I really took take it easy, and this is exactly what he used to say to me, at other times, where don't take everything so seriously in life. Don't get caught up on the little things. It's literally an illusion or a game or a matrix, and all that is real here and all that lasts is love. So all that matters in the end really is love, and the good that you can do when you are here. You can't take anything material with you. And we get so caught up on, all these little things. Like for me, like fear of being judged, or, anxiety about like, well, what if I do this and then everyone hates me, and all these little things, which really are just an illusion. It's just here for this purpose, for learning this game. And one of the last things he said also, so after take it easy, he said, play the game. And at this point, he couldn't even speak well. He had COVID, so he was, losing breath. And the fact that he reiterated this, he said it again. He said, make sure you play the game. And I especially have never forgotten those words, and I know I never will. It's changed me a lot. It's made me really think, like, if I'm only here once in this body as me with this family, I'm going to damn well make sure it's good. This round is a good game. because of Dad, because of that's what he wanted. I'm going to make the best of my life with no regrets. I don't want to, leave with any regrets. And my dad didn't leave us much in terms of earthly possessions, but he left us with the most amazing memories and values that are just priceless. And I will do my best to help as many people, change their lives for the better as they can. And I'm going to try not to stress about the little things as much as I can. Life can literally be taken away at any moment, and we have no control over that sometimes. If it does get taken away from you, what are the things that you wish you got to do? We don't know when it's going to end for us. So take that trip, spend the money on the trip. If you can, obviously, you could be gone the next day. Tell that person how amazing they are. Tell a stranger they look beautiful. Be kind, be generous. Tell your loved ones how much you love them and what they mean to you always. I never want to regret, the people that I love not knowing that. Make memories, because in the end, all we are memories. I've found all these photos from my dad, right, of like literally our relatives, probably from like the 1800s. And I have their pictures, but without memories, or for someone to tell me what it is that I'm seeing, then these pictures, unfortunately, like they're nothing. It's a woman, and I don't have the heart to throw it out. But I'm like, it's so important to have the memories, because we have photos, but if there's no one to explain who are these people with their memories, then that photo, it's not much. Go for your dreams and don't be afraid of what others might think. That is the hardest thing sometimes. And just know that if people, do have anything negative to say, that is a reflection of who they are and not who you are. As long as you are coming from a good place, and you know that, and you be true to yourself, and that's all that matters. We're here for such a short amount of time. Never stop dreaming and achieving, because that is when life gets stale. My dad was always making plans and having dreams or hopes or things that he wanted to do. Like he still spoke about, he wanted to take a last trip to Europe, which unfortunately he didn't get, but he was always still planning. And I really do believe that that's why he lived for so long, and that is why he loved his life so much. He never wanted to go, because he always had hopes and dreams. It's really too quick, for us to be sad or to be miserable for even a day. So I'm going to try to make the most of every day. I'm going to make memories and do what makes me happy, because I know that's what he wanted, for me to play the game, and I know that I will. And I really hope that whatever this life means for you, whatever your desires, your dreams are, I really hope that you have the strength and the opportunity to be able to make the most of it and go for your dreams too. We all have different purposes and different things to learn and desires. And I really hope that you feel the burn to play the game as well, as best as you can. I'm June Mack, and I wanted to thank you for tuning in to the Fully Woo podcast. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have had you here. You can find me over at junemack.com or on all social media as Ms. June Mack. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much if you could please subscribe, rate, review, and share. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a privilege to be in your ears.